our final speaker for the day before going on to the panel. I'd like to welcome Sean Smith to the stage. Sean is Professor of Future Construction and Director of the Centre for Future Infrastructure based in the University of Edinburgh. He led the 2019 Scottish Government review into future housing construction skills. He served on the 2021 Scottish Government Net Zero Emissions Task Force for housing and has worked extensively with a range of sectors involving new build, off-site, retrofit and historic buildings. So please welcome Sean.
Good morning everyone, and a huge thanks to Beth, huge thanks to all the staff, particularly for last night, for the dinner, great atmosphere, and thanks for the invitation to be a speaker today. When I saw I was the fourth person on as a keynote, and I was at the end, I suddenly felt like there's going to be a stage like X Factor. The last person that presents is either going to go really, really well or really, really bad. So stay with me, as I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey. We're going to fly through a lot of stuff. I believe the slides will be accessible through a video or something online afterwards. And I promised Danielle and Katrina that I wouldn't put up too much text. We academics get a bit carried away sometimes, so I have refrained. I also want to kind of transition from energy into many other sectors. So bear with me as we go on a bit of a journey. And we're going a bit of time traveling as well. First of all, we do have a quickening need for Manhattan Project #2, and this is due to the climate emergency. It gives you an overview of what the talk will be about. We're going to talk about timescales, we're going to talk about archetypes, we're going to talk about a national buildings database. Now, for those of you in the audience who are from the UK government or work for a UK government, you are not allowed to put your hand up. Bit of audience participation. How many of you were aware of a tender in July of this year for a national buildings database? Good. About 5. We'll come to that. Okay, so we're looking at the time calendar, and we're going to jump back in time and forward in time. We think we have 22 years to go, 264 months, or 8,036 days. There is another slide, by the way, which talks about the time. I don't think it's up here in hours, but it's actually 196,000 hours that we have over 22 years to do the retrofit by the 2045 deadline. The time available, though, is interesting, is we strip away all the weekends that we don't work, we strip away the Friday afternoons that the construction industry shuts down, and then we're left with 4,661 equivalent days, and it's roughly about 119,000 hours. And then you say, well, we don't work 24 hours in a day. Our real-time delivery is 8 hours and 24. We're sleeping, we're eating, we're communicating, we're traveling, and we need daylight for most of the work. Which means between now and 2045, if we took from today, the 2nd of November, to the 2nd of November in 2045, did we get to net zero? Because we're not going to do it in January. We're not going to announce in January 2045, did we get to net zero? The government will wait probably till about November. They need to get the data in for the year. Let's give them justice. But what this actually means is we have, in real time, 36,000 hours. And that's not a lot. So, on top of that, we have global change. Prior to COP26 in Glasgow, only 30% of the countries actually signed up to net zero. Post-COP26 in Glasgow, 85% of all countries signed up. A fantastic job by Glasgow, Scotland and the UK. Well done. It also created a huge parallel synergetic demand. So we need to go at the moment in Scotland from about 145,000 homes per year in retrofitting. England's about 910,000. Those who have seen this slide before, when I presented it 2 years ago, those numbers were lower. They're lower because we've not done enough retrofitting in the last 2 years, and now the numbers are going up. And Europe needs to do 11.8 million homes per year. So that synergetic demand on everything we're doing means that time is precious, productivity is precious, and how we take the public with us. So Glasgow's #1 for many things, but it's also #1 in the UK for the greatest proportion of flats in one city, followed by Edinburgh. England is roughly about 22%, 20% flats. Wales and Northern Ireland far less. Scotland typically is 38 to 40%. So the complexity for us in London at 46%, the complexity for us when you deal with all the mixed tenures and everything else means that the retrofit journey is actually more complex for us too. And we have 1 million homes, households in flats, it's about 2.2 million people, and England has 5 million households. And much of the solutions which have come forward, understandably, were focused on homes and houses, but not so much flats. And if we're going to do a just transition, we need to take everybody with us. And there is a problem just now when we look at the current EPC consultation in Scotland that recently closed, that was a priority given to heat pumps. Now that's fine if you're in an attached or terraced home or you're on the ground floor of a flat, but it didn't do much for the vast majority of households who are at first floor and higher, or who live in the more difficult properties to treat. So how do we target this in such a way that we can actually create better productivity, better outcomes? Do we increase the grants that we should be giving to the much lower incomes? Probably yes. Do we target where we know those emissions are in the biggest housing areas of our housing stock? Possibly yes. And then we look to the rural side of the communities in Scotland. And here's the example in the south of Scotland, Borders and Dumfries, which has a really interesting statistic. When you look at the population is 4.8%, our housing stock is about 5%. That 0.2%, by the way, is probably buy-to-let or various other things. But interestingly, look at the electricity, gas, and all the other consumption goes up. When you're in rural areas, that energy cost is so much higher and we're using more energy. So do we also look at a geographic coincidence of where these things align, where we prioritise? Moving on, we had the ZEST report that came out in 2021. Many thanks to all the housing associations and local authorities that took part in that. And within that, there was a promotion of archetypes. Great to hear what Germany's doing and other countries. I worked in Germany with the Physikalische Technische Bundesanstalt, with the German government for a while, and I know how direct things can be over there. But it was great, things got done quite quickly. But within this, we promoted the idea of archetypes, and it's great to see that in Ireland, I chair the International Advisory Board for the Construct Innovate, which is the equivalent of BEST in Ireland. They are looking at archetypes, and they are quoting the paper from ZEST from 2 years ago in the work that Ireland is undertaking. And we haven't really moved that agenda much forward here, but we could, because we're very fortunate in the different archetypes that we have. But very important is data. If we get the right data at the right time, pre and post the works, then we have more trust and confidence when we're speaking to the public about the solutions. We know heat pumps do work in certain houses with the right fabric conditions. Why aren't we publishing that guidance on those archetypes where it's worked well? It's not rocket science to share data. It's not rocket science to take that out. But if we do and we take the public with us, that is half the battle. So we've done this before, declaration of interest. I am a non-exec director in robust details. But back in 2002-03, this is where I got most of my grey hairs. There was a brand new requirement coming out in regulation performance for sound insulation for Part E. We said to the industry, you cannot build new homes the way you've always done it. We need to standardise the approach. There are particular archetypes that you will build. Let's get the data. And in 6 weeks, we submitted the data, thanks to the Home Builders Federation. All the product suppliers provided their data to us. We had 119 committee members, 5 working groups, and I had 5 Kevlar vests. Because in every working group we had to go into, we said, you need to come with us on this journey, and we need decisions fast. That open data, that open sharing, that productivity and scale of approach was, to this day, a humbling moment for everyone involved. We all realised if we're going to get, and this wasn't a climate emergency, this was house builders in fear of compulsory testing that was coming down the line. So we've coded things before and we've built them this way. There's now 1.6 million homes built with these constructions. We know exactly what the OR are, we know the performance, and the performance compliance lifted from 47% to 98.5% in 3 years. It's now at 99.5%. Every quarter we get the data and we know what's being built. We're still learning. So, consciously. How do we do retrofit and new build? Oh, that's a shocking thing to say, Sean. We're meant to do it all good from the start. Well, the issue is, if I've got a university campus and I need 30 megawatts of power, but Scottish Power, to be fair to them, it's not their fault, they can only give me 20 at the moment, what do I do with my new buildings? So when I arrived at University of Edinburgh a few years ago, this build had been delayed, not because I arrived, but because of the COVID. And so what happened was, the issue was, they said, well, we're going to relook at this, we're going to retender it. And I said, well, could be a bit more sustainable. And you could almost see the Estates Committee going, OMG, Sean Smith has arrived. Because I started to say, do we have to do it this week? Could we change this? Why don't we build in resilience for net zero? So they listened, and it was great. And many thanks to BDP, who put up with me and many other academics talking to them about what we'd like to do. So what we've done is, everything, we've changed quite a lot of the construction, the facades and other things to reduce the carbon, but what we've done is we've embedded right next to the plant room. I said, I'd like a net zero laboratory, and I want it next to the plant room. And they said, why? And I said, because I want water, I want three-phase, I want drainage and extra electricity in this net zero living laboratory, so to speak, because we're testing a lot of products for the future. And one of these products one day is going to be the right one. And I don't want to have to retrofit outside the building. I want to be able to plug and play to where the plant room is right next door, so I am net zero ready. And I can transition that new energy system in. And they've done it, so my huge thanks to the Estates Department. So Retrofit for All was the theme, and my priority number one is health and safety. And there's very good reasons for that when we look at history, then energy efficiency, net zero, and climate resilience. History is not good for us in energy efficiency or the materials that we choose sometimes in construction, and sadly can often lead to tragedy. None more so than Ronan Point and some of the structural designs and what was done there, Summerland and the materials that were chosen there, what we're seeing recently in RAC, the awful tragedy of Grenfell, and the 2,000 people a year who die from asbestos every year in the UK. So when we're retrofitting, it's good to know what we're putting in, but also what's out there. Now, if we're thinking about a national buildings database, which the UK government is currently doing, they've tendered for that in July, they will shortly announce who's getting that contract, and the reason I couldn't come to Best yesterday, I do apologise, because I had a meeting with the UK government about the national buildings database. And I said, it's great that you're focused on energy, but can you please focus on many other things too? Let's not just make it about energy. Now, we have more information on our own vehicles in the UK than we do our own homes. It's incredible. It's all joined up for cars, but not for homes. Could we do that? Could we actually create a national database which does so many things for us? We're kind of inheriting much of the past, some amazing work that our predecessors and ancestors did. Both versions, by the way, please note, there are two versions to this book. But the future known risks emerging, what's coming, the types of materials we're putting in, the climate change, of course we must deliver at scale. And when you speak to the firefighters, and I've got a neighbour who's a firefighter 3 doors down, this is his biggest concern. Because currently, we're not stipulating in building regulations where you put your battery storage within your home. And as a result, you can get a fire at 600 degrees centigrade within 3 minutes. It is an unusual and untypical fire. So as we push and look at the low energy solutions, let's be ready and let's be careful about the risks that we bring with us. So, could we have a national buildings database? Not only could we identify the architects, but where every building has a code. And that code then links to whatever software people are utilising, that code appears in the EPC. Could we then look at the resilience and planning? Could we look at GIS type data systems, health and safety and confidence? And also have an asbestos national register, which we don't currently have. It would support many things in the UK construction workforce to get up in supply chains, but more importantly, it's when you look at all the other interlinks that you get from the National Buildings Database if you bring things together. It's incredibly exciting, the potential of what comes. We couldn't do this 15 years ago because we didn't have the computing power. We didn't have the AI that we have now. But if you have a keystone, which is the building identifier code, which could be the value office agency, all buildings have a code there. In Scotland we have the equivalent with the land register and the National Register of Buildings. So, with that then create the golden thread that you could then link that building code, the address of your home, that could then link to every other software and system which is out there. So therefore we wouldn't actually be promoting any one software. All proprietary softwares, all solutions could include within their system a building identifier code. So, yes, let's bring it forward. And I wanted to plug, slightly if I may, Professor Luke Bisbee. Some of you may know, he's at the University of Edinburgh. He leads our Fire Research Centre, and he gave one of the greatest amounts of evidence at the Grenfell inquiry. And 2 years ago, he wrote an article in the Structural Engineer magazine where he talked about his concern of the environmental push and rush that was going on and the lack of safety that was sometimes being considered. And he said we must always plan almost for the unintended consequences. And I'm sure we're all trying to do that. But just sometimes we step back and we look at a solution that we're looking at. It looks good, it feels good, everything about it's good. Is there anything about this from a health and safety standpoint that could jump out and make a difference? Let's just always double check that. Let's keep that in the back of our mind. We're on a great journey at the moment. Such an opportunity for young people coming into the industry. Such an opportunity to change people's lives. And if we can do so in such a way that it's amenable to people, and we look at all the different benefits. And so just to finish off, well, how might you fund this? Now this is where you should be. Because how much do we pay for road tax? Government gets 35 billion a year in road tax and fuel duty. But we're probably paying a few £100, maybe more than that per year. But what if every household paid £10 every 2 years as part of the national register of their building? And it's the owners of those buildings, domestic and non-domestic. What if that owner took that responsibility? Or what if the government subsidised the first stage, funded the first year, and then it kicks in? Well, it would release 330 million. If you take all the buildings that we have at the moment, and you take £10 on a domestic house and £20 on a non-domestic house to register every 2 years and update the system, link to the MCS and everything else that's out there, and now you've got a FEMA 100 million rapid reaction fund for the next RAC or the next energy efficiency thing, so you could rapidly interject. You've got R&D training, you've got specialist training for firefighters for the new technologies coming through, R&D for climate change, and it's a collective. There's no profit that comes out of this. It's entirely internal circulating. It could also fund best for the next 100 years. Anyway, just to finish off, it would be great if we had a national buildings database that didn't just focus on energy, but actually included many of these other things that were all dear to all of us. That if we could have that rapid reaction, if we could have that constant supply of the R&D funding that we're all going to need and support, where everyone feels part of something. But I think above all, given everything that's happened before, and the social media that's now kind of chiming onto some of the technologies coming through, and we can't keep control of that, we need to get more trust and confidence in people into the public so they come with us on the retrofit journey. My huge thanks to Best, to everyone today, and I hope I didn't upset anybody by offering to charge you £10 for your home. Thank you.
OMG, Sean Smith has arrived. Staying with us. Thank you so much, Sean. That was really, really insightful. I'm going to actually take a moment to reflect on what you're saying and if we have some audience questions, but you kind of went through, you started off with the big picture stuff, then the archetype, and then the database, the shared database. How achievable do you think this, to have this as a real workable asset? What's your thoughts?
Well, I'm comforted by the fact that the government did put out that tender on a national buildings database, and I think Scotland probably might need to do the same, given how regulations and property law and everything is different. But if it's done under the Health and Safety Act, then it can be UK-wide. That gives a sort of underpinning for the starting of the process, and that current national buildings database tender was related to non-domestic buildings. Is there an opportunity for Scotland to maybe look at a domestic site, or even pilot a domestic site? But I think the speed of data that we have now, and the co-joining that we're seeing here and elsewhere, and the relationships and partnerships, I think is a very good opportunity that we could actually do this really quite quickly. And you've got the National Retrofit Hub, you've got the UK Green Building Council, and you've got many ministers across different parties who really would like to see something like this work. And without giving too much away, every political party has seen my suggestions in the National Buildings Database. But I was how do you describe it? Balancing the future of who might come next.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience for Sean? We've got one at the far left.
Hello, Geraldine Woolley. I'm a member of the Housing and Property Chamber and the Local Taxation Chamber. I wonder, with this national database, are you using the material that is in the valuation rules for rating and council tax purposes? There's already a wealth of evidence there about property. You mentioned the land register, but you didn't mention the other sources.
I couldn't hear the last bit, I do apologise. What was the last phrase?
So, the question was, are you using the valuation lists for council tax and non-domestic rates to integrate into the national database? Because there's a wealth of information that's already available and was very, very useful in distribution of COVID funds, certainly with the non-domestic rates.
Yeah, it's a very good point. There's a lot of very useful data in different areas, and it's interesting that, have I still got it, or did I put it down? Oh, I still have it. Here's the page from the government tender that came out in July. And I'll just read out to you, because it's a very good question. So it's a very good question, because it came out with, and by the way, I didn't know this question was coming. But what they actually said was, here are the different data sets they want the tenderer to review. The Value Office Agency, the Energy Performance Certificates, the Display Energy Certificates, the IBDR, the meter data, the Land Registry, the Ordnance Survey and LiDAR, with, in Scotland, the Scottish Assessors Association, Scottish EBC, Land Registry of Scotland, and it says, and in addition to alternative sources of data. So the government has actually kept an open door in this tendering process of which data might be the best or which integral of data. So it would certainly be my decision. I think it would be a collective of what's the best route.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. One more question. Sorry. Oh, all right. Thanks, Councillor.
Thank you, Sean. That was brilliant. Thank you very much. Question, taking it a slightly different direction. You might not remember we met maybe 10 years ago, both less great. Dave Pearson of Star Refrigeration. We built the large river source heat pumps that are now deployed down at Queen's Quay in Clydebank. And the interesting prospect for any building that connects to that district heating system is a 90% reduction in the carbon footprint for their heating. Now, the primary objective is the sports centre and other large public sector buildings round about, but the pipes run past the tenement flats that sit on the main road. And to deploy district heating into flats once district heating is nearby is relatively simple. Pipes up the back wall, through the hole where the flue would be for the gas boiler, the heat interface unit that would be cheaper than the gas boiler. So I guess my question really is, as well as addressing all the building upgrades that can be done, is there not some sort of joined up thinking with the district heating, given that the government have very strong plans around district heating? The LHEs in Scotland is basically mandating, principally for public sector buildings, but that will trickle down to private sector. But it would be comparatively easy for any building to decarbonise by connecting to district heating if the district heating is decarbonised.
No, I agree. And our first approach in the architects was looking at the fabric, particularly the external wall, and then from that architect classification and other features that come with it, but like what we did years ago with robust details using kind of similar methodology, is then to bridge into you to create a matrix where you could then look at what are the different energy solutions, as energy heat, etc. And then it would be left to people to decide, okay, we're going to do this in the streetscape. And therefore they could make that calculation. Or they're going to use heat pumps, or they're going direct electric, or whatever. And I think having a matrix like that as a second, almost second part to it, would help the designers, that you target, energy demand reduction from the outset, and then which facilitates, if you get the energy demand reduction right, absolutely helps with local district heating. One other final point on that, poor Scottish Water probably dread me emailing them, but we have a fantastic, almost network across the country of sewers. Now, I'm not chasing the heat in sewers. But if I take the Royal Mile, there's a sewer that's yon size that goes right up to the castle. Now, if I could get a heat pipe in there, which I can connect to all these buildings, I am not ripping up all the streets. I am not doing, and I can accelerate my work and reduce my costs. Understandably, the water authorities are very protective. They say we need the whole of that pipe. And I say to them, how often? And actually, there isn't much data to say we need the whole of that diameter of the pipe. So there's an opportunity where we could actually accelerate that retrofit and reduce cost if we did, and to me that's innovative, and to me that's trying. There's queries on it, but it would rapidly accelerate that interconnection. Instead of you having to dig up the road, you could run it up through the main sewer pipe and interconnect the pipe to the house. But I'm willing to be tried and tested.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Sean. We're going to now invite our speakers this morning to join us on stage for a panel session. We've had some really interesting conversations, but what's came from each speaker is this kind of no regrets. We need to massify this, and Sean, you touched on and the risks, and the risks that will bring, so minimize